What's going on, guys? This is the Draft Nerd, and I'm bringing you guys my top 50 prospects in the 2024 NFL Draft. These rankings are subject to change. These are not my final rankings. My final rankings will be coming out in mid-April, but this is just what I think of the players right now. These are subject to change, so without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, just cracking the top 50, I do have Ennis Rakestraw Jr., the cornerback out of Missouri, and he's a bit on the smaller side, about 188, 190 pounds, 6 foot, but he's a really good tackler for his size. He's versatile. He could play, he could play slot, he could play on the outside. I think he could play both, and he's also got a good amount of experience there at Missouri. So I do think he's a little bit grabby, but that can be coached out, and I'd rather my corners be a little bit grabby than, not physical enough. Moving on to number 50, we got Kingsley Suamataia, the tackle out of BYU. And I really like Kingsley Suamataia, but he is a bit unpolished. Like, if a team drafts him, say in around, mid day 2, maybe early day 2, he's going to have to sit for a year. I don't think he's able to start right away, but he's a good, draft and stash for, next year or the year after that. And especially if someone like the Eagles draft him, I think he could be a very solid tackle for years to come. Moving on to Jonathan Brooks, the running back out of Texas. I really think that Jonathan Brooks is a really good running back. He did tear his ACL last season, which is a bit of a bummer, but by the reports that I see, he will be ready for training camp for whichever team drafts him. And I really think he's going to go to the Cowboys because, not many people know, but the same doctor that did Jonathan Brooks' surgery, he works for the Dallas Cowboys. So the Cowboys have a lot of inside details on Jonathan Brooks and his injury. So I think it's close to a lock that Jonathan Brooks is going to the Cowboys. I'm not going to say put money on it, but I really do think he's a good fit for the Cowboys. Moving on, we got Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker out of Texas A&M, and spoiler alert, he's the only linebacker in this top 50. This isn't a very deep linebacker class, or should I say top-heavy linebacker class, but Edgerrin Cooper is a really athletic, freakishly long linebacker who is exceptional at blitzing the quarterback. Now, I think he does need some work in pass coverage, but that's besides the point. I think he's got all the tools to be a really good linebacker. Moving on to 46, we got Michael Hall Jr., the defensive tackle out of Ohio State, and he's a bit on the smaller side, sub 300 pounds. I believe he's about 6'2", but he's going to serve a team a really good purpose as a penetrating 3-tech, and every team needs a guy like that. I would love him on my Giants, but, I think he's going to be a really good pass rusher. He may be able to be a 8, 9, 10 sacks a year type of guy. I really think that's, not too far off of what I think Michael Hall Jr. is going to be in the NFL. So he comes in at 46 for me. At 45, we got TJ Tampa, the cornerback out of Iowa State. Now he's that big, long cornerback. Coming in at number 45, we got TJ Tampa, and he's kind of that height, weight, speed freak at the cornerback position. A team like the Colts would probably love him. He's just a super long, athletic cornerback with really good footwork. The only thing I worry about him with is his ball skills aren't great, and his tackling also isn't great. But all in all, I think he's a really solid day 2 option at the cornerback position. Moving on, we got Chris Braswell, the edge rusher out of Alabama, and I was a bit lower on him for a while through this draft process, but I'm starting to come around to him. I think he could definitely be a day 2 pick, early day 2 pick. And, I don't think he could sneak into the first round, but it's definitely possible. Him and Chop Robinson are around the same area for me, so let's move on to Chop Robinson. The thing with Chop Robinson is the production is not there, but the tools are definitely there. He has all the tools and traits to become a really good edge rusher. We just haven't seen him do that yet. So I think a team's going to draft him solely based on potential and, try to coach him up that way. And I'm fine with that as long as it's in day 2. You don't draft Chop Robinson in the first round, in my opinion. Moving on to Zach Frazier, the interior offensive line from West Virginia. Now, this guy is the definition of a tough mother effer. Zach Frazier broke his leg and literally army crawled to the sideline. That's all you need to know. You want your guards and centers to be, mean, nasty guys, and that's the definition of Zach Frazier. Moving on to 41, we got JT Sanders, aka Jatavion Sanders, the tight end out of Texas, and I think he's firmly solidified his spot as that number 2 tight end. I've seen him going in first rounds in some mock drafts, but he is more of that day 2 guy. I think he's that receiving threat at tight end. I don't see him much as a blocker, although he has improved a little bit in that area, but he's definitely your more receiving threat tight end. Moving on to 40, we got Ladd McConkey, the receiver out of Georgia. And I just dropped my receiver rankings about a week ago, and I'm pretty high on Ladd McConkey. Do I think he's going to be able to be a full-time outside receiver? Absolutely not. But he is amazing at separating. He's got probably the best route running footwork in the class. So I think he could be a top 5 slot receiver pretty easily in year 2 or 3 in the league. Moving on, we got Kamari Lassiter, the cornerback out of Georgia. And I know I'm a bit higher on Kamari Lassiter than maybe the consensus is. I don't devalue his quote-unquote subpar athleticism when he has everything else that is, above average. He's got really good footwork. He's got really good ball skills. I don't want to say really good ball skills, but he's got solid ball skills. He's able to mirror in coverage. He's able to flip his hips decently. I don't know what it is. I just really like Kamari Lassiter, and I think he could be a lockdown, number 2 cornerback in the league one day. Moving on, we got the 2 safeties in Tyler Nubin and Cameron Kitchens. These 2 are both interchangeable for me as my safety 1. Tyler Nubin's more of the, safe, kind of just do the right thing type of safety. And Cameron Kitchens is more of that ball hawk. He's going to take the risks to get the turnovers. But both of them are really solid. It just depends on what you want at the safety position. Moving on to 36, we got Tyler Guyton, and I've always been a bit low on Tyler Guyton. I know most people are going to have him, probably top 30. But for me, he's got all the tools, the athleticism, the length, all the things that you can't teach. But all the things that you can teach, he's not great at. I don't think his footwork's amazing. I just think he needs a lot of work. And if you draft him, I don't want him starting day one. I want him to take a year behind a really good left tackle, like maybe a Trent Williams or maybe a Lane Johnson if the Eagles draft him, and have him learn behind a guy before he starts right away. If that happens, I think he could be a very serviceable tackle in the league one day. Moving on to Jordan Morgan, some people have him as tackle. I kind of like him more as a guard, but we're going to talk about him as a tackle. And he's really athletic for a 6'6", 320-pound frame. I also think he's got a really strong core, good footwork. He's just all around a good player. And he could have came out last year, but he decided to come back for another year. And I don't really think he's helped his draft stock. He kind of just stayed in that fringe first round area for most people, including myself. Moving on, we got J.J. McCarthy at number 34, the quarterback out of Michigan. So why is he placed here? It's because I'm so unsure about J.J. McCarthy. I still have so much to watch on him to really solidify my opinion on him. Some people say he's going to be a top 10 pick in the draft, which, I guess I could see happening. He's got traits, he's got potential, but I really don't think he should start year one. He has to learn behind someone. But he shows flashes of what he could be at Michigan. It's just that Michigan didn't ask him to do a whole lot really at all. He's about the biggest coin flip in this draft class, I think, on whether he's going to be good or if he's going to be bad. So I have him in my 30s, but you could see other people have him in their top 15. So I don't really know where to place JJ McCarthy at the moment. Moving on, we got T'Vondre Sweat, the defensive tackle out of Texas, and this guy is humongous. He did not want to weigh in at the Senior Bowl, and I think that's for a reason. I think he's around that 360, 370, maybe even 380 mark. But the thing with T'Vondre Sweat is that he is obviously a really good run stuffer, being that big, but he also has the athleticism to be somewhat of a plus pass rusher as well. I think he has pass rushing potential to go along with that, obviously really good run blocking ability. So some people have him in the first round. I could see it, but for me, I have him at 33. Moving on to number 32, we do got Michael Penix, the quarterback out of Washington. The thing with Michael Penix is, for the most part, he's a really good quarterback. Injury history might drop him down people's boards. The other thing that I've been seeing on his tape is that he is not great under pressure whatsoever. If there's a guy in his face, or if he's having to throw on the run, he's not the best quarterback. Plus, he's got a bit of a clunky throwing motion, but I think that's just because he's a lefty. All lefties look a bit odd. So, other than that, I think he's a really good quarterback. I think he does have pretty good arm strength. We're going to be seeing him throw at the combine, so that'll be a big indicator on his arm talent. So, I got him at 32 right now, but I do think when draft time does come, he's going to be a second-round pick. Moving on, we got A.D. Mitchell, the receiver out of Texas. Now, I think A.D. Mitchell is if CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens had a baby. That's A.D. Mitchell. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as, a CeeDee Lamb, but he's got all the things you would want. He understands route running. If you watch his tape, some people might say he's not the best route runner, but he's just a really smooth route runner, and he understands leverage and how to separate from corners. And that's what you want in a receiver. He's also that, jump ball threat as well. I mean, the only thing that you might have questions on is his after the catch ability. They didn't really ask him to do that at Texas. Most of his, receptions were 14, 15 yards down the field. And at that point, you don't really get to see after the catch ability as much. So I really like A.D. Mitchell. I could see him going to maybe the Chiefs, and that would be disgusting. Moving on, we got Keon Coleman, and he's the receiver out of Florida State. He's the big 6'4", 200-plus pound receiver. And there's a lot of questions that have surfaced around Keon Coleman. A lot of people think he's not going to be able to separate at the next level, including myself. But you cannot deny his 1, athletic ability, 2, his insane contested catch ability. Those 2 things can get you pretty far in the league. You would like to see him be able to separate more, and I think with time that'll come. Because I don't think it's anything to do with his athleticism. I just don't think he's got great footwork, and I don't think he's got great route running ability that enables him to separate. So I think he could be teached up to be able to separate a bit better. And if that happens, he's going to definitely be a really good wide receiver one day. Moving on, we got Graham Barton, the guard, tackle, center. Who really knows? He's got all the flexibility in the world when it comes to what position he can play. He played tackle last season. I really doubt he'll be a tackle in the NFL, but I see him as a guard/center, and he's a really good one. Moving on, we got Bo Nix, the quarterback out of Oregon. The thing with Bo Nix is he a check down machine? I mean, you could say that, but he does also have all the tools. Throw away anything that's not Oregon tape, because that's not the same Bo Nix. The Bo Nix from Oregon is a really solid quarterback. He might have, not thrown the ball down the field as much, but he's just a really solid player. I think he's really smart for the position, and I wouldn't mind drafting him in the first round. He's my quarterback, 4? So I like him a bit better than Michael Penix and J.J. McCarthy, which might be a hot take. I'm not really too sure. Moving on, we do got Troy Fautanu, the offensive tackle out of Washington. Now, the big question with Troy Fautanu is if he's a tackle or a guard. And I think that's really going to depend on the combine and what his arms measure out as. If his arms measure out, a bit longer than what I think they are, then he could play tackle. But I think I think he lacks the length to play tackle full time. So I like him a bit more as a guard, as does most people. But besides that, he's just a really good offensive lineman. Regardless of what he plays, he's that mean, nasty offensive lineman with good power. When he latches on with his hands, you're not going anywhere. So that's what you really like in an offensive lineman. Again, I like him more as a interior offensive lineman, probably a guard, but I think he could be a tackle if his arms measure out longer than what I think they are. Moving on to 26, we got Troy Franklin, the receiver out of Oregon, and I'm known to be a little bit higher on Troy Franklin than most people. I know especially guys like Brett Coleman, think I don't even know if he thinks he's a top 100 player. I know he's pretty low on Troy Franklin. But me, I don't see his size concern as big as a problem as some other people do. I know some people think, he's, sub 190 at that 6'3" frame. Like, that's rail thin, which I agree with. But he's a really smooth route runner. He's got great speed. He's going to be a really good deep threat in the league, I think. He had a bit of a down year when it came to catching the ball, but I do think he's got really good hands, and I do think he's above average contested catch guy. He just, he didn't show that last year, but if you look at his, 2022 tape, he's a solid contested catch guy, and he's got solid hands. He might have had a down year, who knows, but I do think his hands are more reliable than people kind of make it out to be. Moving on, we got Braylon Trice, the edge rusher out of Washington, and this guy's a pressure machine. At Washington, he was always in the top 5 in pressures for in all of college football. If you draft Braylon Trice, you're asking him to get after the quarterback, and that's what you're drafting him to do, and he's going to do a really good job at it. Moving on, we got Brian Thomas Jr., the receiver out of LSU. And Brian Thomas is definitely a boom or bust type of prospect. I think he's going to be a really good deep threat. He's got the size at 6'3", 6'4", and the only thing with him though is he doesn't have a very extensive route tree. Similar to other guys in this class, he's got that go ball, he's got the comeback, he's got the curl, he's got maybe the 10-yard out, but anything in the middle of the field, he's not as polished in, which for me is a problem. But if you're drafting him just to be that deep threat number 2 option, I think he's going to be really solid in that department. Moving on, we got Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle out of Texas, and I do have him as my defensive tackle 2. A lot of people have him as their defensive tackle 1, but for me, I do think he's a really good penetrating defensive tackle. He's got solid run defense as well, but I don't know. I don't see it with. I just don't really see it with Byron Murphy as much as I do with another guy on this list, but I still think he's a really good player. Moving on, we got Amarius Mims, the tackle out of Georgia, and I'm really high on Amarius Mims. He hasn't played much college football. He's not the most experienced tackle in the world, but from what you have seen from Amarius Mims, he's a really, really good offensive tackle. If a team drafts him, again, you don't want him starting day one just because he's not the most experienced guy, but he's got all the tools and traits in the world to become that guy. He's got really good length. He's got really good power, in my opinion, so I'm just really high on Amarius Mims. Moving on to 21, we got Jer'Zhan Newton, the defensive tackle out of Illinois, and this is who I was talking about, who's my defensive tackle 1. He's a bit undersized, sure, and apparently a lot of teams see him as a second-round type of player, but for me, I don't know. I think he's got really good pass rush upside, along with really good run defense as well. I think he's an all-around really good player. And a lot of people like to knock smaller defensive tackles, but we're starting to see them work out in the league now with, obviously, guys like Aaron Donald. But Kalaji Kancey from last season had a really solid rookie season. And he's also a smaller defensive tackle. He's more of a penetrating guy, same as Jer'Zhan Newton. So I could see Jer'Zhan Newton going top 20. In the draft, but I really do think he's a first-round player. Moving on, we got the teammates in Terrion Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry. I'm a bit higher on Kool-Aid McKinstry just because Alabama asked Kool-Aid McKinstry for the most part to guard the other team's number 1 receiver, and I think Kool-Aid McKinstry is above average in the athleticism department. I think he's got solid ball skills, and I think he's a bit more sticky in man coverage, and I think he could play zone coverage as well. The thing with Terrion Arnold is, 1, he was asked to guard number 2s a lot, and I mean, teams did definitely target Terrion Arnold more than Kool-Aid McKinstry, and he showed his ball skills, his ability to stick within coverage, so I think both of them are really solid options. I just think I'm a little bit higher on Kool-Aid McKinstry. Moving on to 18, we got Jackson Powers Johnson. Now, he's just steady rising up my board. He's just a really solid center. I like him more as a guard because if he does play center, he's going to be a really heavy center. And I also think his snap accuracy isn't the best, at least from what I've seen on tape. Again, that could definitely be coached out, but I like him more as that, left guard, right guard, and he's just a mean, powerful guy who's able to get to the second level really easily and, deliver that highlight block. So, I don't know. I like Jackson Powers Johnson to maybe the Seahawks or the Dolphins in the first round. I think he's definitely solidified as a first-round player, though. Moving on, we got Quinion Mitchell, the cornerback out of Toledo. And Quinion Mitchell had a really, really good Senior Bowl. He kind of proved everything that, people had questions with. They had questions on if he could guard the more elite receiver prospects. Because at a school like Toledo, you're not really asked to guard, NFL or quote-unquote NFL talent. But at the Senior Bowl, he was able to do that at a high level. He probably looked like the best cornerback there. And he also, a lot of people, including myself, had questions on if he was able to play press coverage because at Toledo, he played a lot of off coverage. But in his few press snaps at the Senior Bowl, he looked solid in that department as well. So, Quinion Mitchell rose up my board quite a bit. I think he's in contention to be the first cornerback off the board, although I have 2 cornerbacks who I think are a bit better than him. Moving on to J.C. Latham, the tackle out of Alabama. Now, this guy is, your definition of a hog molly. 6'6", 326 pounds. He's a massive man. And, he's really, really, really solid in run blocking. His pass blocking needs a bit of work. I think he's a bit slow-footed in my opinion, but I mean, if you're a team drafting a guy who's just going to be a really solid run blocker, J.C. Latham is your guy. And I mean, I know some people like the Go House have him as their tackle 2, which is a bit absurd for me. I like him more as that tackle 4 area, but again, just a really, really good run blocker. Moving on to 15, we got Jared Verse, the edge rusher out of Florida State. And, him and the other 2 edge rushers in this class are, side by side for me. Jared Verse is more of the in-between where he's going to give you a lot of production year 1, but also has, a good amount of upside. The other guys in this class are, either all upside or all production and minimal upside. But, I mean, I really like Jared Verse. I think if he came out last year, he would have been a top 10 pick. He probably would have went to the Raiders, and I think Raiders fans would have much more rather have had Jared Verse than Tyree Wilson. So, sorry, Raiders fans. Moving on to 14, we got Nate Wiggins, the cornerback out of Clemson. And, this is just your really long, wiry, athletic cornerback. These are the type of cornerbacks that I love. Guys that could play man coverage, zone coverage, off coverage, press coverage. Like, he's your definition of a all-around cornerback. Tackling is, a bit questionable for me, but other than that, he's a really sticky guy in coverage, and I think he'll be the first cornerback off the board, and I really love Nate Wiggins a lot. Moving on, we got Dallas Turner and Laiatu Latu, both edge rushers, and for me, Dallas Turner has all the traits and upside in the world to be a really, really good edge rusher one day. He just hasn't quite put it all together. He's a bit on the smaller side as well, but he does play with a bit more power than you would assume he would play at. So again, I really like Dallas Turner. I think in all likelihood he'll be the top edge rusher taken off the board, but again, he's people are going to be banking on his traits rather than what they've actually seen on tape. And with Laiatu Latu, this guy is a pressure machine. He's going to give you a lot of production day 1, but he is a bit limited on his upside. I think he's maybe a bit topped out when it comes to potential, but again, if you get Laiatu Latu now, that's good enough. He does have some injury concerns with his neck. He was forced to medically retire at Washington, so that's something that the teams at the combine are going to try to dig through, and if his medicals check out, I think he could be the top edge rusher in this class, undoubtedly. Moving on, we got Cooper DeJean, the cornerback out of Iowa. Now, he is my number 1 corner. Some people think he's a safety. Some people think he's a slot corner. I do think he could play on the outside, but regardless, I think he's just a really instinctual guy. You're not going to want him to be a press man corner, obviously. He does have athletic limitations when it comes to changing direction and flipping his hips, but his straight line speed is really good. His overall athleticism is really good, and I mean, his ball skills is solid. His coverage is solid. His instincts are solid. Like, other than his, change of direction and, ability to flip his hips, other than that, he's, above average in almost every other category. He's the best, run defending cornerback in the class. He's, a great tackler. So I don't know. I'm really high on Cooper DeJean. I love him, but I don't think he's going to be the first cornerback taken off the board just due to his questions on whether he's a safety, slot corner, or outside corner. Moving on to the top 10, we got Jayden Daniels, the quarterback out of LSU. And a lot of people might be like, wait, Jayden Daniels at 10? He's mocked to go at most 3 to the Patriots. And that is true. I do think he's going to go top 3 in the draft. But, people do got to slow their roll on Jayden Daniels. He's not the most polished guy in the world. But, I mean, if you're a quarterback needy team, you're going to draft him in the top 3. But compared to other guys in a vacuum, I do think he's, more around that top 10 area. But he has improved every single year he's played, all the way from his days at Arizona State until now when he won the Heisman. So as long as he gets to the league and keeps improving, I think he could be a franchise quarterback for, whichever team drafts him, whether that's the Commanders, Patriots, or, maybe some other team. Moving on to 9, we got Talise Fuaga, the tackle out of Oregon State. And I've really come around to Talise Fuaga. Again, I think he's a really good run blocker, but his pass rush or his pass protection does need some work. But I think he's a little bit more polished and pass pro than a guy like J.C. Latham. They're both really good run blockers, but I think Talise Fuaga is a bit more polished in the pass blocking category. Moving on to number 8, we got Rome Odunze, the receiver out of Washington. And Again, another guy I've really come around to. I wasn't the highest on him during summer scouting, but I mean, I do think he's a top 10 player. He's that big athletic receiver who is going to get open, deep down the field, in the intermediate side of the field, or, short areas. Like, he's your all around really good receiver. And as a Giants fan, I wouldn't mind him at number 6, but there is a guy a little bit higher on my list that I would rather have. But moving on to number 7, we got Olu Fashanu, the offensive tackle out of Penn State. And I don't know what it is. I feel like, Olu Fashanu's getting a little bit disrespected in a lot of people's big boards and mock drafts. I think he's pretty solidified as that tackle too. He's a really, really solid pass protector. His run blocking needs to catch up to his pass blocking, but I don't know. I think he has all the upside in the world, and I think he's, a fringe blue chip guy for me. So I don't know how he's in some mock drafts falling to the Bengals or something like that. Like, I do think he's a top, 10 player 100%. Moving on to number 6, we do got Malik Nabers, the receiver out of LSU. And this is your just all-around solid receiver. I mean, after the catch is where he thrives, but he can also do all the other things you would ask for a receiver. In and out of his breaks are really crisp. He could be that deep threat. He could be that intermediate threat. He could be that short route threat. I mean, he could really do it all. It's really hard to find, any nitpicks in Malik Nabers' game. I guess if you want to be really nitpicky, during his routes, he's not the most physical, but once he gets the ball into his hands, he is definitely physical. So I don't know. But moving on to the top 5, we do got Brock Bowers, the tight end out of Georgia. And I do think he's going to fall a little bit in the draft, but in a vacuum, he is a top tier tight end prospect. He's up there with the likes of Kyle Pitts and guys like that who, went really high in the draft. When you look at Brock Bowers, you see him as that, elite receiving threat guy, a guy who can, beat any linebacker, any safety. You really would want to put a cornerback on him, and even that, some cornerbacks are too small to guard him. Like, he is a mismatch nightmare in the receiving game, but he's also a really solid run blocker. Like, he puts in the effort to be a good run blocker. With guys in the league like a Travis Kelce, elite receiving tight end, but he might, take a few snaps off if he's asked to block. He's not the best blocker, but I think that Brock Bowers has the potential to be a really good blocker as well. Maybe not to the tone of a George Kittle, but I think he's somewhere in between a George Kittle and a Travis Kelce when it comes to blocking. So again, just a really elite tight end prospect, but I could see him falling out of the top 10 just because tight ends aren't valued as much. Moving on to number 4, we got Drake May, the quarterback out of North Carolina. And I mean, I don't know. Some people have Jaden Daniels jumping him in mock drafts. I still think Drake May's, solidified his spot as quarterback number 2. He might be a bit erratic at times, but, other than that, I would call him somewhat of a dual threat quarterback. I think his rushing ability is more to the tone of a Patrick Mahomes, where you're not going to, design any runs for him, but if he needs to, get a first down with his legs, he is going to be able to get a first down with his legs, no doubt. Like I said, I think he's a top 2 pick in the class, and I think he could be a potential franchise quarterback for either the Commanders or the Patriots. Moving on to number 3, these top 3 players right here are my blue chip prospects, and starting off with Joe Alt, the tackle from Notre Dame. He's all around just a really good tackle. He's a really good pass protector. He's a really good run blocker. I had questions on whether he had that strength to be a really good tackle coming into the season, and he showed that he does have the strength to be a really good tackle. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't really see any holes in Joe Alt's game. I mean, I think whoever drafts him, maybe the Titans, is going to get their left tackle of the future for the next 10, 15 years. Coming in at number 2, I do have Caleb Williams. A lot of people love to hate on Caleb Williams. They say he's going to be a bust. They don't like that he paints his nails. Like, dude, no matter what you think of Caleb Williams as a person, he is a very, very good player. If you watch the tape, and I'm more specifically talking to you Bears fans, because I know you guys, love to hate on Caleb Williams. If you turn on the tape with an unbiased eye, you would see why he's a top-tier quarterback prospect. some people might not like that he, paints his nails or wears dresses and stuff like that, like, or skirts, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, I think he's a really solid leader, and I think he's a really solid player. So I don't know. I think he's going to be really good in the league. I think he has the potential to be a top 3 quarterback in the NFL one day. And I'm not going to lie, he does have, a bit of a high bust potential, but I'm banking on him being an elite quarterback in the league one day. And then moving on to number 1, we got the receiver out of Ohio State, Marvin Harrison Jr. Any good things you want to say about a receiver applies to Marvin Harrison Jr. He's 6'4", 205. He's got a really nice frame. The only thing that you can maybe nitpick about Marvin Harrison Jr. is his ability to make people miss after the catch, which, dude, if he can do everything else at a high level, I do not care if he can make someone miss after the catch. He's an amazing separator for his size. He got great route running. His contested catch ability is, top tier. Maybe only Keon Coleman is a better contested catch guy than him. His body control is amazing. He's able to get both feet in bounds, even when it's seemingly impossible to do so. Like, he's just a perfect prospect in my opinion. I think he's an elite prospect to the tier of Jamar Chase, guys like that. Like, he is top tier. I don't care what anyone says. He's gonna be a really good receiver in the league. And similar to what I said about a guy like Bijan Robinson last year, when Marvin Harrison gets drafted, he's automatically a top 10 receiver in the league. Just like I said with Bijan Robinson. When Bijan Robinson gets drafted, he's automatically a top, 5 to 10 running back in the league. That's how good I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is. So yeah, with that being said, that's going to do it. Let me know what you guys think of my rankings. Again, these are not my final rankings. Those will come out in April. But these are just, some of the players I think are going to make my top 50 and my opinions on them as of right now. We still have the combine to look forward to and pro days and stuff like that. So there's going to be a lot of movement going on from now until mid-April. But just let me know what you guys think of my list right now. If you liked the video, consider subscribing. And as always, this is the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.